Like moths to a flame, you've thrown caution to the wind for a glimpse into our world. Well, now you're in it.
Welcome to Effed Up Stories.
Hello, folks, and welcome to a new episode of Effed Up Stories. I am your host, Will Pender.
And I am your co-host, Ryan Sharp.
And tonight we will be telling another fan submission, this one coming from Dan Osafi. I believe we've told one of his stories before. This one involves a ritual and a magic book and
Two of my favorite things.
and Shadowmen. Now you gotta say three.
Three of my favorite things.
Yeah,
I love a good shadow man.
Me too. And this one has multiples. So that's like extra bonus. So before we jump into Dan's story, I just wanted to, again, if you guys have an effed up story of your own or pictures or video, we ask that you submit that to us at our official website, which is effedupstories.com. That's effedupstories.com. We will get it on the site and we will get it into a podcast. And we're going to be doing near-death experiences next week. So make sure you tune into that. We got some really interesting fan submissions on the topic. Stories you have not heard before and probably, actually, I do not believe exist anywhere else. So yes, tune in for that. So as I said, this story we're covering tonight is from Dan Osafi. It's on the official website. It's called A Spell Gone Wrong. And it involves a ritual and Shadowmen and a magic book. So let's start with that. Now, Dan's story takes place in 2002, and he was 7 years old at the time. He said it was a dark and stormy winter night, and his family had gone to bed. Actually, he was gone to bed as well. And like the little kid he was up longer than he was supposed to be. He was past his bedtime. And he was reading this book that his parents gave him after his grandfather died. And if you've read any of his submissions on the site, his grandfather had taught him a lot about the other world, the spirits and entities, how to contact and communicate with them, how to banish spirits and stuff like that. So, his grandfather, in a lot of ways, showed him about this world at a young age, prepared him for it, and he was able to carry on to traditions and the knowledge passed down. So he was reading this book that his grandfather had passed down, and in any case, in this book, it had to do with how to, there was this whole line in there that if you had done this spell, like if you had been communicating with certain entities, there's a spell in there that you could use to ensure that the spirit was gone. Like like for example, if you had made contact with a spirit and you were done, you thought you were done, and like say you're using a Ouija board, and okay, I'm done. It says goodbye, you're done. But if you don't do it properly, that entity is still there. So this is almost like a banishing ritual or spell in this case. Okay? But in the book, he was interested by this line that said, Under all circumstances, do not use this spell before you have been cleansed. Okay, but like kids, actually like a lot of people. He says like kids, but I say like a lot of people. You get curious what would happen if you did it the wrong way. What would happen, he was thinking, if he did this before he got cleansed. So that's what he set out to find out. He set up the white candles. He circled them all around him. So he had a circle of candles around him, and he began the spell. And he doesn't remember what the spell exactly consisted of, but he remembers that he read it out loud. And after he did so, the fire that was the fire on the wick of the candles, they began to grow larger. As he finished the spell, it grew in intensity, like very noticeably so. He said it was kind of similar to what you'd see in the movies, when an evil presence or whatever would enter a room. And then, this part of the story really painted some interesting visual imagery to me. But he said as he finished, he began to see shadows, multiple shadows, shadow people. And they began to run around the circle of candles. They were running the perimeter very quickly, as if to trap him. They were running so fast it was almost like a blurring of a wall of shadow people running around him. And he got the impression that they were getting ready to attack him. So he said he began to get scared. And compared to, at the young boy at the age of 6, he had seen a lot already at this point. But he said already, right now, this was like a drop in the ocean compared to what he's already experienced. And he said as this was happening, his dad woke up, because he could hear this commotion going on. And his dad went to his room. But as soon as he opened the door, some force pushes him back. He says it was like a black mist, and it just violently pushed him back. The mist formed the shape of a demon, but somehow had the face of an angel, and it pushes his dad out, okay? And he yells out to his dad. He's trying frantically at this point to get out of the circle that he's trapped in by these running shadow men. But there's some kind of force that pushes him back into the center. And he has this book on him, and he realizes, this is where all this stuff came from. So he opens the book, and he starts reading further into it to how to end this, thing that he had conjured up. But of course, the page he was looking for was gone. He said it was almost as if somebody had specifically gone in and taken it out of the book. So he looked back at what he learned from his grandfather, anything that he could recall, and he began to put it into action. And so he started to think about what exactly it was that he was dealing with right now, and what could be the weakness of this thing. And he soon realized that one of the shadows in this group had horns, but all the other shadows had claws. And his conclusion was that, it must be demons that he was dealing with. And, the fire on these candles began to expand, and it's like they would blow towards him, and they started to actually rise up and get to the point where he felt he was trapped by fire. But he continued to read through the pages, trying to find some kind of connection or way out of this, and he didn't have a whole lot of time. This fire was growing, and it was getting closer and closer and closer. And he thought that he would probably, not have an opportunity to do this. And if it trapped him there long enough, he was afraid that it was going to go after his dad. But finally, he reaches the last page of the book, and it said something about the demons and what they were actually there for. And he said he don't know why it stood on the last page, but he remembers that's exactly how it was. And so as he began to chant, and he said, "In God's name, get to where you came from." And he said the shadow men stopped their running and they just stood there and they stared at him with this. And even though he couldn't see their faces, it was like he could sense this strange look upon them as he stood there staring at them, almost as if it was a joke. And he said, as this happened, once they stopped and you know, the craziness had died down, his dad ran into the bedroom and he grabbed his Bible and he ran back and he ran into the bedroom and he raised the Bible over his head and he said, "In the power of God, the creator of the universe, the greater of all good, the Father of Jesus Christ, get to where you came from." And after he said this, he said this loud crack of thunder rang out. And he said all the shadow people were gone in an instant. Just like that. Never happened. And he said his dad looked at him and he said he saw the fire that had been around his throat, like as if it should have burned him. And he walked to him and he picked him up out from around the fire that was around him. And Dan said he was very shocked in the fact that he didn't feel any pain. And he said that the father, after he got his son out of the middle of the fire, he went and he grabbed a fire extinguisher and he put out the fire. And he just told him, "I don't want to talk about it." Never, he just put him to bed. And he said even in the later years, when he's brought it up, his dad he never wanted to talk about it. He would just say, "Believe in God." So I thought, I really don't know what it is that he was dealing with. I mean, it sounds like he said it was demons, and of course you got shadow people. I don't know what I associate shadow people with. What's your take on that, Ryan?
Well, that's a very short and sweet kind of tale. The kind of quintessential tale. Young person, in this case a very young person, playing with things that they don't understand, right? If you have a book like that, I'll give you a little piece of advice. Memorize the book before you start doing things. You don't want things to start getting out of control, and then you have to look into the table of contents to find the part of the book which tells you how to get things under control. So the shadow figures. Now, there's so much conjecture all around the world as to what these shadow figures are. And, shadow figures play a predominant role in a multitude of cultures from all around. And even, with people who don't have anything to do with the supernatural. Sometimes they're associated with UFOs and crypto creatures or cursed objects, demons and fairies and jinn. Now, my personal take on the shadow figure is pretty simple. We live in a spatial dimensional, one temporal dimensional universe. So we live in a 4-dimensional universe. There's up, down, back, forward, left, right. And then we have one temporal dimension. And that's just a single direction, an arrow going from past to present. And it pierces, or past to future, I'm sorry, which pierces through the present. The present is literally the transition period between past and future. And it's that state that we're always in, the present. Now, what happens in the many worlds interpretation of our universe, if we're going to, kind of add a scientific bent to this, when you have something that's from a universe where the physics are a little different, if you're dealing with an entity who comes from a different set of rules for physics, Maybe it's a universe that's very close by. It's a dimension, a realm that is very close to ours, but not here. It's somewhere else. These people are from elsewhere. These beings are from elsewhere. Now, if you were to be in one of these other realms, and you're trying to get close to this realm, in my opinion, when you're trying to view things across the boundary, the veil, some people call it, but the boundary between dimensions, between worlds, between universes, I could certainly understand how that image, you're looking down the hallway and there's something on the other end of the hallway looking back at you. And, you might think there's a shadow figure down the hallway, but they could very well be in a different realm altogether, looking back at you through this veil, which distorts their appearance. Or perhaps it translates their appearance in a way. Well, my personal belief is that shadow figures of, maybe not every single instance, but in the majority of the cases, a shadow figure, a shadow person is an entity that's in a different realm that's close enough to ours to be visibly perceived, but they're not entirely here. They might be trying to get into here, or they might simply be there for observation purposes. But in either case, the resulting effect is the same thing, that we see this outline of a figure without any features. And that's my personal bend on that, my personal take. And I think it's interesting that his father uses the phrase, the creator of this universe.
Yeah.
Okay, so this universe, maybe there is a God. I don't believe in him, but maybe there is. And if there is, well, maybe he did create this universe, or he had some hand in it. But that's not to say that he created them all.
Well, that is one thing that they do reference in the Bible. I mean, they say that God wanted to. What were the name of the people? I know it was Moses. Anyway, they wanted them to go to war with people who worshipped other gods, right?
Oh, you mean the people being the Israelites?
The Israelites, yeah. Yeah, that's how up to date or how familiar I am with it. But anyway, it just that saying alone kind of acknowledges that there are other gods, because he specifically says those who worship other gods, right?
Which kind of puts God in the role of cosmic as a cosmic bouncer.
Well,
right?
It depends on how you look at it, right? Because I mean, the Bible, as we know, it has been twisted and turned by man. I mean, it's man's interpretation, especially from back then when they were even more ignorant than what we know.
Not only has been twisted and turned, but it was written by man. It's not like
it never had a chance.
I'd have a lot more faith in a religious teaching that we only discovered once we built satellites and we looked down at the Earth and said, "Holy shit! Look, all these rivers are in the pattern of words." And somebody wrote a book on the planet,
Well, from what and I keep referencing this stuff, I guess because it's so in my mind lately, but in near-death experiences, a lot of people describe God as being, not just not really an entity, but just life force itself. Like it's the everything. It's like a pure light. It's the it's the creative force of the universe as we know it. And that's different than how we explain. I mean, that's not.
Well, that's relegating a deity to something similar to gravity.
Yes, exactly.
He's become a force,
exactly,
not an entity.
And that's the difference, right? Because
I'd have easier job believing in the Holy Trinity of. Or, well, I guess it'd be beyond Trinity, because we'd have the weak and strong nuclear forces, electromagnetic force, gravity, and then God.
Well, the way they had it, it was still like it emanated love and understanding and all this stuff, but it was just this. It was just a thing, like not a thing. It was like it had a. It's really really hard to put into words, and I guess that's how they put it as well. When they come back, there's certain things they just can't explain as hard as they try. There's just not human words for it, but just the concept that.
Which is why the general image of God is actually Zeus, right? The big bearded man in the sky.
Well, I guess humans decided to try and make it something that we can understand, right? Try to put it on a human level of understanding. But again, like unfortunately, humans tend to turn and twist everything to their end. I mean that's been religion forever, right? But I'm not really trying to get into that topic because I know that
no, we're kind of going a little bit off base here.
That
now, I've gone through the process of lighting candles and participating in rituals, but I can honestly say that at no time have I ever invoked the name of God or Jesus Christ to drive these entities away.
No, you want them there.
Well, generally, yeah, that was the whole purpose of what I was doing, was to draw these entities.
You'd be a dick to call them in and then call on,
then be like, Dad, come kick these guys out of my room.
Like, what the hell are we doing? We're just playing here. We're just playing.
You invited us over. Why kick us out?
You broke my vase. Get out. Right?
Which I guess leads to, if you're going to participate in ritual magic, especially summoning. I mean, it's one thing to participate in some kind of a ritual where it's you against another person, or you trying to help another person, or you trying to help yourself through, you're trying to bring luck to yourself, or you're trying to commit a destruction ritual against somebody, or to help somebody else. Those things are kind of in a realm of their own. But when you start dealing with entities outside of this universe, outside of this reality,
different rules,
you're dealing with summoning. We're talking about a whole different ball game now, a whole different level. And whether you're 6 years old or you're 60 years old, unless you have a really good handle on what you're doing, and I mean that's kind of a smug thing to say. I know, it's like saying, unless you really know what you're doing, you should never skydive. Well, how the fuck do you learn how to skydive unless you're just some idiot jumping out of a plane at some point?
You learn real quick.
You have to be that dumbass jumping out of a plane who knows absolutely nothing about skydiving at some point. I guess to further the metaphor with skydiving is generally you're strapped to the back of some other person who has some experience in this, and you run through it that way. So I mean, it's one of those situations where if you're going to get into ritual magic and the summoning of spirits from beyond, maybe enlist the help of somebody who's done it before. I guess it's unfortunate in this case that Dan didn't have the guidance of his grandfather beyond whatever age. I mean, he said he was 6 years old with this current experience, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that.
No, he was 7.
Oh, he was 7. I'm sorry.
His previous story, he was 6.
There you go. My bad. So I'm going to go ahead and say that his grandfather hadn't been dead for very long, or let's face it, he wouldn't have been able to retain anything anybody told him if he was much younger than 5 or 6 at the time. So in this instance, it's unfortunate that he didn't have more guidance, but here we run into the age-old problem, when it's the same thing whether you're delving deep into science or delving deep into ritual magic. and you have, very religious parents, and it's like, Dad, why does the sun come up and down? And they say, just believe in God, son. Like, you don't need to ask any questions. Just believe in God. I think Dan may have been serviced a little better if his father would have tried to explain things a little bit to him. Maybe his father didn't know, but at least give an attempt, because we're human beings. Not knowing is what drives us to want to know.
Maybe his dad didn't want to know.
Yeah, well, exactly. when I first started out with summoning and this kind of thing, it wasn't because I knew what the result was going to be. I mean, I've always been a scientist at heart. And whether that experimentation took place in a beaker or under a microscope, or in a ritualistic setting with a few drops of blood and my own focus and will and words of power, it's still the same thing. I'm an explorer at heart, and I need to know. And if I don't know, here's the question: are there spirits or aren't there spirits? Well, I'm going to go and find a way to answer that question, right? And I think that's how many horror movies start, and I think they start that way. It's because it's a theme. It's a historical theme that has been with us for thousands of years.
Hence the phrase "curiosity killed a cat," right? But
yeah. Well, that, and because cats put themselves in stupid situations all the time. The cat that decides to sleep in the fan of your car.
Yeah.
It was curious right up until it hit the fan, and
and then it's no longer a question.
Right? Then it's down to 8 lives, and now it knows that's a bad choice. I lost half my face.
Imagine they can only be wrong 9 times. Right? So,
well, we can only be that wrong once.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But so I mean, just to kind of reinforce what you said about Shadowman, I've said this in other podcasts, but I think the same thing, in that they're interdimensional beings. And one really good case I think that says that for me is the infamous case on Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes,
when
exactly.
One of the scientists had I believe it was an infrared camera set up.
Yes,
and he saw
it was an infrared monoscope.
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, and he watched through that scope a portal open up, and a shadow.
Well, they seen the portal with their naked eye. It just looked like a spot of light in a field, right?
Yeah, but through the scope, they saw an actual tunnel open up
in 3-dimensional space, just hanging there.
And this shadow person crawl out of it, and once it hit the ground, all the animals went haywire. And I mean that forever stuck with me.
Very powerful image, isn't it?
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, very inspiring too, for if I like to do different kinds of art, whether that's music or digital
visual
art, and man, I took ideas like that and ran with it. Totally love that stuff. But that is,
and not to mention that the whole thing with Skinwalker, like the whole story with Skinwalker Ranch, not necessarily the shape-changing witch creature that the legend actually refers to, but the actual ranch. I mean, the most common factor in that whole story, right? If we're looking at paranormal things, if we're going to take Skinwalker Ranch, and I mean, let's face it, right? For anybody who doesn't believe in Skinwalker Ranch, fuck you. A billionaire fucking bought that place because it was so messed up, right? He still owns it to this day.
Yeah.
For that very reason. Wow, this place is so screwed up. I own an aerospace company. If I can learn one thing to give me an edge, well, then I'm a billionaire times 2.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't fault the logic of somebody who has that much money. He's obviously somebody who's made some good life choices. and knows how to hop onto an opportunity when he sees it. But getting back to the overall theme of Skinwalker was very dimensional in my mind, right? You had these windows opening in the sky that the protagonist of the Skinwalker story. I always mix it up. I can never remember if his real name is Sherman or Gorman or
No,
Tom
his
or
real
Ted.
his real name is Sherman, and the
Sherman.
Gorman was the fictitious name in the book.
Okay. So we know that he reported seeing these windows open up in the sky, and apparent vehicles, zipping in and out of them at times. Strange entities appearing out of the air.
Fuck, I love that story.
So many different experiences that just seem to manifest out of nowhere. And to me, like, every corner of that tale screams interdimensional, other universes, other worlds.
Oh, it does. I mean, you got windows and you got portals. That's it right there. Right? That's
Right?
all you need.
So when it comes to this entity crawling out on all four, and that was the thing that got me, the imagery was this entity was squat down on all fours, kind of splayed out like a spider on its four limbs, skittering out of this long black tunnel that just trailed off into nothingness, hanging in the air, and skitters out to the edge, looks around, drops down into the field, and runs off and disappears.
And how the hell did what is it that the animals sense? Because without that scope, I mean, the humans wouldn't have known anything, really. I mean, they would have heard the animals.
I have a theory. I don't know. I'll say for the record, I don't know for sure, but I have a theory. And I think that many, many, many creatures are very sensitive to the electromagnetic field of our planet. Okay?
Yeah, you're on to something there. I actually watched something with a whole thing on cows and the direction that they graze in based on their ability to sense either that or where the sun was or something. Anyway, it's just
so
something like
insightful.
that. Yeah, I totally can't remember, but
in my opinion, we are immersed in the Earth's magnetic field. I mean, it reaches miles or kilometers, depending on which side of the border you're on, into the sky. It is a very powerful, all-pervasive, all-encompassing field of energy. Now, you and me, we're not really connected to that. We live in a house. We're not connected to the earth, is what I mean. Is we live in a house. We're surrounded by electronic devices with motors and wires everywhere. We wear shoes with rubber on the bottom of them. I mean, there's a whole movement of people who believe that in order to make yourself healthy, you need to reground yourself to earth. And they literally spend so much time a day either digging around in the garden with their bare hands or walking around on the bare earth with their bare feet to regain a kind of connection. I mean, that makes sense. If you look into the whole balance and unbalance of electrons and objects, it's like, you wear wool socks, drag your feet across the carpet and touch somebody, zap. Well, what happened? Well, you built up an excess of electrons in your body, on the surface of your body. When you reach out and touch somebody or touch an object that has has fewer electrons, well, electrons are like water. They're going to flow to downhill to balance themselves out in a way. Right? If you got 1 million and they got 500,000, well then you're going to lose so many electrons so that both of you are neutral compared to one another. And so I mean that theory kind of holds a bit of weight in my mind. I don't know if I go all the way, but likewise, I think animals are intrinsically more connected to the Earth's natural magnetic field and the actual charge of the earth beneath their feet. And I mean, when something comes here from another dimension, even when something comes here from outer space, there's the whole reason why comets look the way they look is because they're outgassing, and there's a whole electrical thing that happens there where they're changing charges, because the whole part of our solar system has a different charge than stuff that's way out in the outer part of the solar system. That's just a basic electrical dynamics, I guess is the word here. So if you got something coming here from another dimension, I would put a serious amount of money. If we could actually determine an answer, I would actually bet a significant amount of money on there being a significant disturbance to the Earth's natural magnetic field when things come here from another dimension.
Because the physics are all wrong.
The physics are all wrong. And I mean, physics, we know, and if you listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson for 15, 20 minutes, I mean, he will make you a believer. What physics is known. We know what makes the planets spin and what makes the Earth do the things that it does, between earthquakes and storms and tides and all these different things that go on in our natural world. I mean, we to a degree understand how it works, and it's because of physics, because things are repeatable. There's an actual framework in which things operate in. But at the same time, I've experienced enough in my life to say that while I am a firm believer in the scientific principles and physics and biology and chemistry, I know that there are things outside of those principles, things that are at odds with those principles and that fly in the face of it, and even to the point of disturb those principles. When you have something disappearing and appearing out of thin air, I mean, that flies in the face of general physics. Fine, that stuff happens on a quantum scale. I won't argue that, but we don't live on a quantum scale. We live in a macroscopic world, and in the macroscopic world, that's not normal. So when things like that happen, I think they have a definite effect and disturbance upon the natural physical workings of our world. And because you and me and everybody listening to this, I mean, let's face it, we've removed ourselves from nature. We're outside of so many naturally operating principles that if there is a disturbance in one of those things, I mean, shit, there's times I don't leave my house for 4 or 5 days. If the sky turned purple, I'd come out, I'd go to come home on a Thursday. On Friday night, the sky turned purple. I wouldn't know until Tuesday morning. So,
I mean, to summarize everything that you just said, Dan, at the age of 7, should not have messed with that book.
Well,
right?
I mean, a little long-winded of an answer.
Yeah.
But I think that what we are talking about is extra-dimensional entities. I mean, that's the main focus of this story.
It is. It is.
However, obviously the scientists at Skinwalker Ranch didn't use candles in a book to summon that entity. Yet there he was, right? Or there it was. So there may be different ways to approach bringing otherworldly entities into this world. But I think ultimately the result is the same. I mean, look at the havoc that was wrought on this kid's home. I guess Dan's not a kid now, but look at what happened. I mean, they had to get a fire extinguisher and a Bible, and there was a whole thing that went on. So in summary, yeah, don't fuck with the book.
All right, so I mean we're like 40 minutes into this, but that's the moral of the story. Don't read books you don't know anything about. So, anyway, I appreciate the story because I love Shadow Men and I love the whole thing with spells and stuff like that. And when I read,
definitely a fantastic story.
And
like
when
a
I
big
read,
thing, you got to go out to Dan for having the courage to tell it.
oh hell yeah! And the thing is, like, and I've read a couple of Dan's stories now. They're super interesting. I mean, obviously he's had a very interesting upbringing due to his grandfather. I mean, he's learned many interesting things. His grandfather taught him many interesting things, and I mean, look how young he is when he's dealing with this stuff. And for me, I mean, just being such a fan of, I'm a fan of the paranormal in general, but I love Shadowman. Like, in fact, I think that at some point you and I should do a podcast that's totally nothing but Shadowman. Just,
I'm all for it.
yeah, because I can't believe we haven't done it yet. I mean, it's one of our favorite things, and we've never done a full-on Shadowman podcast. And for me, like that section where he's sitting on the floor with the candles, and these shadow men start running the perimeter of the room, and essentially at a speed to which it creates a blurring wall of black, right?
Oh, I wanted to make one comment on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, to us, a shadow figure might look like they're moving at a impossible speed. But think for a moment that in their realm or wherever it is that we're getting this visual information, when I'm going to assume it's their home universe, maybe they're just walking around the room having a look. But in our universe, the distance that they're traversing is they're traversing that distance far faster in relation to our universe.
You mean like in Minecraft when you go into the
into the nether,
and every step, every step is like 10 or 100 feet or something.
Exactly. I think we might be getting a little too geeky now, though.
Okay. We've already ran way amok of the topic at hand. I'm already expecting comments like, "What the fuck was that?" But I had a couple drinks.
This is bound to happen with any kind of conversation. But I don't think that is too far of a stretch to think that, maybe a step in their dimension is 20 feet in our dimension. So if you have somebody in another dimension viewing you and you both can see one another through some process, the whole shadow figure, because maybe they're looking at us and all they see is a shadow figure. We're looking at them and all we can see is a shadow figure. And they take a step, to the left to get a better look at this weird shadow thing that's in this universe, which is us. Then all of a sudden it looks like, oh my God, he flew across the room at an impossible rate. That's all I was going to point out.
And let's not forget that almost all cases where people experience these things, they report a very a strong sense of fear emanating from them, right? And to me, other dimensional, and it makes me think of lower vibrational being.
Yes.
Right.
It's interesting that you bring that up because, and again, I don't want to go too far off base here, but I mean, let's face it, we've done it. So let's go. We look at the experiments that were performed where they put that magnetic helmet, the God helmet, on somebody.
Oh,
right?
yeah, I remember
that. And you dial it up, and all of a sudden they feel like there's people around them. And, maybe the presence of these beings can disturb the normal electromagnetic field of the world of our everyday life so much that it sends your brain into panic mode. It's like, what the fuck is going on? There's something not right. You need to get out of here.
Yeah.
And the more I think about it, the more that makes sense, right? I mean, there are certain primal aspects of your brain that are geared towards fight or flight. Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to rhyme so much, but
you're Dr. Seuss tonight. Where's my damn green eggs and ham?
If you end up in a situation where your brain is experiencing and we know we know that the brain and magnetic fields are intrinsically linked. We know that. You look up, you go look up any kind of neuroscience papers on magnetic fields in the brain, and you'll find all kinds of wacky shit. But if that's what's happening here, and I really do believe that's the case, that beings from other dimensions, maybe not all of them, but in instances where we have beings coming from other dimensions, or they're present or close enough that they could be disturbing these natural fields to a degree that it's sending the brain into panic mode, right? It doesn't know danger is afoot. There's something odd going on. Something has changed in your environment. You need to leave. And that's what fear is telling you, get out of here, run away, fight, do whatever the hell you got to do, because it's designed so that you survive.
Yes. So I think that about sums it up. And
probably 10 times over.
10 times over. Just Dan should not have read that book. I mean, that's what I got from everything said tonight. But of course, without having done that, would Dan be who Dan is today? I bet you he has a lot of really cool stories.
Exactly. I bet those experiences enriched his life more than destroyed it.
And I hopefully entertained all you fine folk out there. And we probably got more stories from Dan. I got to say, I've read a couple of them. They're really, really cool. So thank you to Dan, and any of you guys out there who has an effed up story of your own on the paranormal, or pictures or video, get that into us at the official site, which is effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. We'll get it on the website and into a podcast, and we're going to be covering the near-death experiences soon, so be sure to check in for that. And with that having been said, good night.
Thank you so very much for listening to my insane rambles tonight. Have a good one.